Too far away. Alrighty. Oh, that's a little better. Well, I guess I'm going to be closer to the cell phone and be able to read on it. Well, hello. Let's try putting it down here. Oops. Literal trial and error. Scan the TARDIS. Don't want the nostril cam like I had on the test last night. You'd think I'd have done this ahead of time, but the lowest production values on the internet. Okay, yeah, that's better. Who's out there? Send me a hello so I can see your name. I think this thing's supposed to have a thing to let you see who's watching, but I have progressive glasses on, so I keep tilting my head back. Well, welcome to the TARDIS Live on our first ever live podcast. Well, good morning, Pursuit. Happy to see you. Glad you could make it. So, I was so busy last night trying to get all this stuff, figure out how this interweb stuff works, that I never actually thought about what we should talk about. I got the air conditioner going because we're in Florida. It's a little too warm in here. Otherwise, you guys would get a nice close-up of me sweating. So, I did make some progress on the XP50. And as you guys can see, it doesn't exactly have a glove-in-hand fit. But it's such a interesting subject matter. And ODK which I did a little quick background on. They weren't around that long, but I can't even find out what it stands for because everything's in Japanese. I'm pretty sure these were made for the Japanese domestic market. And one thing I have noticed is that models that were made for the Japanese domestic market in the 60s and 70s did not really have the same standard that they have. Hey Brian, hey Larry. They didn't exactly have the same standard that we're used to for like Tamiya and the export models. And it kind of makes you wonder about a lot of the domestic models. You guys probably are familiar with Mike Machat, the well-known aviation artist. He had a long-running arrangement with Lodella, which is basically Revell of Mexico. And from what I've seen, although I've heard a lot of you guys have built Lodella kits and have talked about how they weren't the same quality as Revell, particularly in the quality of plastic, overall they were, from what I can gather, the best thing going in Mexico, because they were made for the, oh, it's John, it's afternoon where you're at. Good afternoon. Morning, Larry. So there was a, there are definite issues with kits that are made just for the local market. But, and people forget that a lot of companies like Aurora and Revell, they started off, you know, locally. It was Aurora and Revell that were really anxious to get in the international market. And I'll be honest with you, these kits I've been building, they're on par with any Aurora kit. Maybe not quite up to most of Revell standards, but the domestic Mexican kits, the domestic Japanese kits, especially by the way we're used to models today, not not exactly, you know, any great shakes. In the day, they were okay, but they weren't, you know, I don't want to say we giggle and snicker at them, but just don't buy something that was made, you know, 40, 50 years ago for a domestic market and expect to get a modern kit. And I think that's, I think most model builders are savvy to that. 8 o'clock, Keurig, which means, you know, I would stick a coffee pot in the Tarbis, but then I'd leave this place shaking. Oh, morning. Oh, the Sergey in Russia, who's written a couple of the productions I put out, one on Tupolev and model building in Russia back, you know, years ago. It's ironic that because they had in many ways, some of the roughest kits out there. Sergey was telling me all about them, sent me a lot of great pictures, and there was some really rough stuff. I think one of the reasons the American kit model companies probably were ahead of most countries outside of England, you know, one could argue France, was simply because we were some of the earliest to get into it, and we had the big industrial base. There's a lot of you remember there was no such thing as cutting a mold model back in the 50s or 60s. I mean, it wasn't something any tool and die company was specializing in. But Japan had an advantage because, and it's you know, it's an irony. Japan had an advantage because after World War II, everybody was trying to get in. They were trying to industrialize the country. In fact, one could argue that their desire for raw materials and industrializing their country was a big chunk of what led to the war, at least in the minds of some militarists, but that's a history lesson. Point is that after the war, they were like, okay, let's industrialize. Everybody, they wanted to become the sort of like the engine of industry of Asia. And with America rebuilding the place, and people like Dr. Robert Deming down there teaching total quality management and things like that, that was more of their car industry. But the point I'm getting at is that having won the Second World War, the Allies are sort of the attitude that, you know, we won the war, you know, we can make whatever we want. So when these new things come out, and of course kit models are one of them, oh, these messages disappear kind of quick. I'm not exactly sure I'm supposed to keep them up here. Yeah, well, I'm sure I'll be some pilot stuff for you. How's the weather? Weather's warm here. Metar. Oh my God, he just gave me a. I just got a. What the heck just happened there? Are you okay? I'm back. Got to be careful what I touch here. Revell, as I understand, is about a 5-person operation, and all their stuff. Real quick, man, this gets a little confusing. Revell, as you know, everything was bought out by Revell of Germany, and then they decided to unload a bunch of the stuff. I know where some of the stuff went. I know it was bought off in auctions. Actually, everything was bought off in one auction by, I believe it was round 2. Round 2 went through what they wanted, and what they didn't want, they sold off. So other people have a bunch of the Revell molds round 2. I think round 2 wants to emphasize the cars mostly right now. So now, Revell of Germany is actually made in Poland. There's an irony. Stuck is made in Poland for the Germans. That stuff is Revell of Germany gets their stuff made in Poland. The rest of the Revell stuff, the Revell that's based in the U.S., if I'm not mistaken, they sent their molds to China. So if you buy like these 2 P40s I have up on the shelf, which are actually the old monogram P40s, but because they've been rebranded Revell, they've got all the molds. Those were actually made in China and then shipped back to the U.S. and sold by the U.S. distributor. So that's my understanding on the Revell thing. Just back to my original point is that after the war, Japan got so big and we hadn't rebuilt, they got so big into industry, and a big part of industry, you know, is plastics, son. So they got huge into plastics, which is one of the reasons that the Japanese got so big into kit models. And of course, here in the U.S., we had companies doing it. And there were so many tool and die companies out there. Uh, crap, gotta leave work. Well, this thing will be up on the internet, don't worry. This thing automatically loads to YouTube when we're done, or at least it's supposed to. But you realize everybody in the 50s and 60s was making models. They were working in the dark. I mean, one of the people joke about Auroras, you know, how their kits were off, but a lot of cases Aurora was literally going from nothing more than a couple of photographs. I call him sick. Let's not get each other in trouble. Well, hello, Sarah Jane. All the way from England. Well, I guess it's probably after lunchtime there. So, you know, you think about, we all have the common bond of enjoying building kit models. And there was a big excitement. Was it? He says the Revell German Opel was overrated. Huh. Thought it was supposed to be one of the more popular kits. Oh, 307. Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, it is. You know, you go to a tool and die company that's used to making, cutting out molds for knobs for ovens, or making, steering wheel dash shaped things, and you tell them I need this model, all these tiny pieces have to fit precisely. You have to have the best people you can get to work on it, and it was like anything other industry, it was an evolutionary thing. And Japan, Tamiya, got really good at it because they were willing to make the investment to do it. And old man Tamiya, or Tamiya, he'd made a lot of wooden toys and they were okay, but he was really, really adamant about, the quality and everything. And of course, again, the quality is relative over time. But any kit model company that wants to and has the money to can make really great kits. But a lot of companies, of course, in the good old USA, it's, all right, let's focus on a combination of, we've got a market, we have to make money, but we want a decent kit. And as I pointed out in my very original video on all of this, the RAM video, Revell, Aurora, Monogram, the three companies had very distinct personalities. And Tamiya would probably be closest to Monogram in that Aurora just wanted to, get stuff out there that people would buy. And Revell was just adamant they had to be the big international company, and Monogram was all about, no, we just need to focus on a good quality product and the rest will take care of itself. Oh, thanks. Yeah, Squadron Shop video, that's little more than almost reading their own history. I just had to change some tenses and move it through, take out some stuff that was clearly just kind of like plugging their own business. Didn't want to turn it commercial. Communicate via, yeah. Oh, really? He used to live about, oh, that's cool. You guys have heard me talk about Andy Anchus, who's the one who's really writing the Aurora files and providing the material for it. He and Matt Irvin are buddies. And in fact, you asked about the Revell molds, or what happened to Revell. When those molds kept changing hands. Was it Revell molds? No, I'm sorry, that's a different story. When a bunch of the Aurora molds went up for grabs, Matt Irvin and Andy Anchus had to go take a look at them. And well, you guys, I think the first video with Andy, we talked about that, and the treatment of the molds was horrible. Yeah, Matt has, and I've seen some of Matt's work online. He does a lot of real space for museums. Man, that incredible workmanship. I just, as long as I've been building models, I still don't understand how some of these guys do it. I have trouble laying a piece of tape straight and getting a clean demarcation line. Of course, my biggest problem is a lack of patience. I start to get in a hurry, which is not good for a model builder. Power low. So anyway, the personalities of the companies were very different, not only here but in other countries. Aurora was just, of course, Aurora hit pay gold with the figures. Revell wanted to be the world's biggest. You know, they had to be everywhere, international, everywhere, which is why they wound up with Ladella and Revell, Germany, and all these others. And then Monogram was all about the quality, and they were the slowest to get in the international market. But everything comes at a price. Revell was always reinvesting and growing the company, so they were always kind of financially precarious. Monogram was the exact opposite. They were very conservative with their money. They focused on what they did. Of course, they were better known for cars, but as a result, Monogram was able to buy Revell eventually, and Aurora both, because it's in Graham's books and other sources that the guys at Aurora, sadly, they actually had wound up a lot of infighting. Shikes wanted to go one way, Giammarino wanted to go the other, and then Diker came in, and the rest has been covered in the Aurora files. I'm doing fine, thank you very much. Well enough to head back to work soon. But Monogram, it's one of those bitter ironies. Monogram buys all the other companies, so it's the umbrella, and it sucks the rest of them up, and then gets rid of the molds it doesn't want. But ironically, they decide that AMT, they were the best. Oh yeah, I've heard that a lot of guys really like to kit bash AMT. In fact, I was watching old Jamie from was it Mythbusters? He has that web channel. He was talking about German tank models were their favorite ones to get greeblies for kit bashing. But car models were popular too, and he showed one his little T8 Skyhopper that was made for the second Star Wars movie, which is actually, I guess, the fifth in the order that you make them. And he turns it over and is like, those are ME-109 landing gears used as the wing actuators. I recognize that long stork-like landing gear. Well, anyway, so but for apparently reasons they got a little vague on in the book, it had something to do with taxes. The they decided that I think the main reason was that Revell had this huge international presence. So of course, Monogram wasn't being run by Besser and Reeder anymore. I don't think at this point. I believe it was Mattel was running the show, but they said, hey, you know what? We're just going to put everything under the Revell logo because that's the name everybody recognizes. So, half the kits that say Revell on them are Monogram molds. My P51s that I did, the bottom of the tail, Monogram 1998. I'm at work. Okay, I'll talk quiet. Oh, you're near Morton Grove, yeah. Well, Monogram had several factories, but I think their mothership, their headquarters, I believe, was more. They moved around a few times. They pretty much stayed in Illinois. So after the transition and everything, and then Revell, goes through a bunch of hands, the Gearbox and Hobbyco and all these others, and then Blitz gets them in Germany, and then Blitz finally decides, okay, we're going to make this, we're going to sell that. So the mold, and here's the thing, I didn't even realize this. Hey, from Canada. So I only learned this recently. A lot of the molds never left Illinois. The ownership changed. It's like having gold in the bank. I mean, physical gold, and someone gives you a gold certificate, and when you need money, you don't move the gold, you just sell the certificate to somebody, but the gold always stays in the vault. And it was like that, a lot of these things, and to their credit, I was told by someone who was there that Monogram actually unlike Johan, which the molds had just been put out in an outdoor shed and left to the weather and got rust and everything else, which destroyed a lot of them. Monogram understood that they wrapped them all individually, kept them in a climate controlled, so the molds are in great shape. I think they even have a couple they never put into production. Hampshire, England. Well, hello. So the Monogram stuff was in excellent condition, and the Aurora molds that they kept, and the Revell molds. So in Illinois, you have these old Aurora molds, and the old Monogram molds and the old Revell molds that are still in good shape and can still be used. Oh, again from Canada, hello. And God bless these guys for thinking ahead like that. So there's a potential some of these things at some point could be put back into production. Now, a bunch of these molds were acquired by a US-based company, but I don't want to start. A lot of you guys already probably know who it is, but I kind of don't want to say anything because I don't have their permission yet. But they, and some of the molds went other places too. But a lot of them are some of them the old Aurora molds, and so you can sort of look and see who's about to release new repops of the Aurora kits. Dun, 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 dun. Including some glow in the dark stuff's coming back. Yeah, Elk Grove, Illinois. Yeah, that Revell that was in Elk Grove was after Monogram had taken, because originally Revell was down in Venice, California. And oh, well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. Gosh, I mean, I think one of the reasons I love getting into all this stuff is because when you say model airplanes, or models, I shouldn't say model airplanes because I built everything, but my heart goes back to 10-year-old Max riding his bicycle in the 95-degree Florida heat, down to the Rexalls or the dime store to go pick the model of the week or model of the month. And when I would read on the Venice, California, it might as well have been the far side of the moon. And Monogram, I probably built more Monogram than anything else, and I'd look at it and say, Morton Grove, Illinois, which of course is just where the offices were at, and Farnborough. Man, I've still watched the videos of the old Farnborough shows, and that's casualties and all, because they had some serious accidents at Farnborough, or even the audience was injured or killed. But that little unfortunate accident mishaps aside, Farnborough was a way to run an air show. I mean, people just sitting on the grass watching those old early series jets roar by. Now there's some stuff to be interesting to model. I really have to admit that the British, the Germans, the Japanese, and the Americans, I think, had some of the most interesting experimental stuff to model if you're into aviation. I think the first time I saw it was a Sea Vixen, which is the one that's just that, built sort of off the Vampire, that twin boom jet that has the operator down in his little bunker on one side and the pilot on the other. Like, it's kind of England's answer to the Blumenvoss BV-141, being lopsided. It may be the most lopsided thing to come out of England. And it's one of those things you're like, did they build that right? And you get the kit mold and you're kind of like, I think there was a mistake in the mold. Like, no, that's the way the airplane was made. And you're like, it's either genius or madness. I can't decide which. Bletchley, the Code Breakers, yep. I saw the imitation game, and don't know how accurate it was, but I enjoyed it. Of course, you could pretty much have Morgan Freeman or Benedict Cumberbatch read the phone book, and it would sound interesting. So anyway, so places to me like Morton Grove, Illinois, or Venice, California, where the models were made, they were they were the model builders mecca. Which brings us back. You mentioned the Squadron Shop earlier. I would say that the Squadron Shop magazine, I really think I enjoyed getting the catalogs. I would order catalogs from everybody, and some like Aurora, I think they're like 25 cents. Maybe they were free. But I used to get so excited when the catalogs would show up in the mail. Now here's the thing, I didn't have any money. I'm 7, 8 years old. So the catalog was as close to the model as I could get. But in the catalog, I could have all the models in my mind, because let's face it, model building is as much about imagination as anything else. And I would get so excited. I remember getting upset one day because I got a big manila envelope in the mail, and it was some thing, flyer or something. I remember having a fit because I thought it was my Aurora catalog, and I remember having a fit, throw out the trash. I was like 7 years old, and hey Rick, better have the voice in my head. Well, fortunately, the voices in my head are pretty benign. So in a way, because you can sit there and just go, I would reread the same catalog over and over again. you wind up, oh, I want that one, and the next thing, oh, I got to add that, I got to add that, and don't get me wrong, we all love the internet. Heck, we've been spoiled by it, and it's great because now you can order a model in a couple of days, poof, it magically appears, and probably in the future, Amazon drones will drop it in your house. We live in the future, but there was something about that, and I know nobody wants to wait 6 to 8 weeks for delivery anymore, but there was something about that anticipation. I got a model coming, I got a model coming, and a box shows up in the mail like, oh, and that doesn't take anything away from going to the store to buy one, but you know, you went to Rexall's or the dime store, Aurora, Monogram, Revell, maybe Lindbergh, maybe a couple NPC kits, whatever the wholesaler or the jobber was sending to them, because these stores tended to buy these things in kind of like a bulk, and it would just be mixed up at the warehouse by the wholesaler or the jobber. And I don't think I actually saw Tamiya kit in person. Hey, what's up? I don't think I saw a Tamiya kit in person until my brother came home from the was it 71 World Jamboree in Japan, and he brought me a Tamiya T34, which was the one that had the little remote controller, had the wires that came out of it, had wires to it, and our friend Doyle Pope built it. In the Tamiya video, I show a picture of the same kit, and that kit probably, if it was unbuilt and complete, goes $300 on eBay easy. They probably got buried under their stash, which upset a few people, especially those who, well, I didn't figure they got it right. Yeah, they used to talk about the imitation game that some folks over there got a little upset. I'm not surprised. Very, very rarely does a movie get that kind of, a historical movie get that stuff right. I mean, they have entire YouTube channels like History Buffs that are dedicated to that kind of thing. And there's some guy in Louisiana, I think it's Anti-Shun. He's like an indie filmmaker, and he does a lot of stuff about the inaccuracies of Civil War movies. And so anyway, back to models. So the entire, the entire atmosphere around building models when we were kids was different, because you had this rare selection. You had to wait if you ordered something. It was a much, and you're younger, so these things are a much bigger deal. And it's today, of course, it's much easier to get what you want. There are so many more options, but of course, the trade-off from that comes in that it kind of loses a little of the magic, maybe would be the way to put it. I don't think I'm being unfair. And that's not to say we don't still love it or anything. It's just that childlike anticipation is just a golden thing that it's, and every once in a while, you'll find that rare thing and you'll get all giddy with excitement again. And that's a rare treat. It'd be like finding the ITC Thor missile launcher unbuilt, or the Godzilla's go-kart, another holy grail kit. And good morning, Havoc. 7:30 my time. Oh, you on the West Coast? Oh, there's one little thing I never told you guys about. It's just one of those little things. The day we murdered 72 models in 10 seconds. Killing. Let's not go into that stuff. So my brother and I were, oh gosh, how old were we? Before I went to military school, I think. So anyway, I guess it was around 72. So we had believe it or not, it gets really freaking cold in Florida in the winter, especially up here in the north part of the state. We lived in Quincy, about 20 miles northwest of Tallahassee, and a little agricultural town. Anyway, it'll get down below 20 degrees Fahrenheit, well below 0 Celsius. And so since our room was in the basement, we had little space heater. This one was, well, it had a grill on it, but it's basically just hot coils. And they tell you always turn those things off before you go to sleep because, you know, they can start a fire, and they can't, as we're about to prove. And my younger brother and I were diligent about it. And I guess he was 7 or 8, I guess he's 9 years, anyway. Well, God bless her, my sister came downstairs. We'd already gone to sleep. We turned off the space heater, were bundled up. And my sister came downstairs, and she saw, she could feel how cold it was. She goes, they must be freezing. So she thought, well, she'll turn the space heater back on. It was between our beds. Well, my younger brother would get, I guess he was 6 or 7. He would get so cold that he would crawl into bed with me and just, you know, old army trick, you know, share body heat. And he wound up doing that, and when with 2 of us on that single bed, when he rolled over, his pillow fell off and fell against the heater after my sister had come in and turned it back on. And I mean, she was a teenager at the time, so we both woke up, and there's a 6-foot high flame about that big around, just roaring up his wall, like, ah! You know, we both ran up, told our parents, house is on fire, and everybody got out of the house. Above that, well, it gutted the room, but our house was made of brick, and my dad had built it with internal brick walls as well as exterior brick walls, so the fire was contained in the room. But our entire shelf of like 73, mostly 1/72nd scale models, turned into puddles of goo. And I mean, it looked like Godzilla had come through and found the entire horse parked on the ramp. And even the big, what was it, USS Missouri model I had wasn't spared. And the whole thing looked like a painting by Salvador Dali. I mean, just, you know, the melting clocks, you know, the melting models. And I'd have probably taken a picture of it, but the camera melted too. So, you know, if hindsight been 2020, I should have grabbed a camera and found a gun and got an Aurora Godzilla model and posted it there and taken a picture or something. That would have actually been kind of cool. But to see the models, like, you know, wings, and see them drip down and extruded like when you heat plastic, but a whole Air Force of them, oh, it's just, it's like a waterfall of melted models. And I haven't thought about that in 20 years. Oh well, stuff that goes through your mind, right? Another adventure in model building, sort of. Like the time you forgot you had wet glue on your finger and scratched your eye. Oh gosh, these things disappear before I can read them. Okay, don't know what we'll do with your daily words of wisdom. Oh, oh yeah, we had a couple of hunting rifles and shotguns that were in a closet that got the stocks burned, but because they're in the closet, they were largely protected. The futility of life, it's cold but true. And ironically, my brother was able to stand down and refinish the stock on an old 16-gauge shotgun, and it kind of gave it that black and brown camos burn look, and we actually left it like that. It looked pretty cool. And we just looked, we didn't have any ammo that could have gone off. But and my brother, our attitude was, Mom, we have to start our model collection over. Oh, another thought just popped. My dad had to put in an insurance claim. And the insurance, of course, has to cover it. He goes, well, what did you have in the room? We're telling him, he goes, and my dad's like, okay, we had to tell him every single model we had and get the approximate price of each one because all of those were covered by insurance. And I remember every time I'd go, yeah, he just smiled, goes, it's another $1, it's another $1. And he wound up with this huge list of models and stuff. And I was like, does that mean we get to buy new models? And so we had to start our collection all over again from scratch. Break our little hearts. And half those models we'd already destroyed playing with them. So, but anyway, the little connections your memories make after a while. But let's see, NASCAR, yeah. Oh, the old MPC 113 APC variant. M113 is the first tracked vehicle I ever actually rode in when I was in the Army, at infantry training down in Fort Benning. I told my dad, I said, yeah, when we woke up, he was filling out that paper. I said, yeah, we woke up because we were like, great, it's like we were having a dream. And he goes, for the insurance company, it's a nightmare. You know, the mighty 113. You know, they piled a full squad of us into a 113, which is a box-shaped armored personnel carrier that the Army used for a long time. And I was amazed. I didn't realize how smooth track vehicles go down the road. I mean, they're a lot smoother than wheeled vehicles. I'd never ridden in one before. Partly because they're heavy and partly because they bring their own road with them. But we're driving down the road and I'm like, man, this thing rides good. But one thing I noticed was none of the armor guys, none of the tread heads did not, would ever have their face in the turret ring or in the hatchway. It was always above it or below it. And I asked, and I was sitting there riding along, like looking like this, and, you know, out of the big square hatch on top. And the guy goes, "Don't do that. You either get down or get up." I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "Because if we stop this thing, apparently turret rings and hatchways, if you're like this, they break a lot of noses and knock out a lot of teeth because that vehicle can stop surprisingly quickly and boom, and you're going into, you know, 1.5 inches of solid steel or refined aluminum, and that's a good way to spit your teeth out like chiclets." Chiclets are a little square chewing gum we have here in the U.S. Anyway, so we're riding along that APC and I'm like, man, this is great. Well, then I go to the 101st Airborne Division, which is a helicopter unit and air assault, air mobile, and you know, we're running 2-3 miles PT every day. You know, we march everywhere we go. Choppers fly us in, and then we walked after that. And we're just leg infantry that got flown to the FIBA, forward edge of the battle area. And then we would get these guys coming in from Germany, from mech units, and all they would do was complain about how much walking we do because they went everywhere in the track. And when they did do patrols, they dropped all their gear and they just went with their load-bearing equipment, their web gear, their weapons and ammo and water. But in the 101st, since we were light infantry, which is kind of oxymoronic, we had to carry our rucksacks with us everywhere. So when we went on to these things, because we were usually moving, we had 50, 60 pounds of gear on our back, and yeah, it's tiring. I would say my back trouble that I have to this day probably originated there, well, in high school football. But anyway, so all the guys come back from mech units, you know, they were, I don't want to say they were chubby. I have certainly no grounds to point any fingers at anybody. Let's just say they didn't get as much exercise as we did, and they in the airborne, and they weren't too happy about it. And ironically, oh yeah, the old FV432. Yep. One quick note was that the airborne, if you're ever making airborne models or whatever, or troopers, there's a misunderstanding about the airborne. Airborne is not the same as paratrooper. It's like all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs. Well, all paratroopers are airborne, but not all airborne are paratroopers. If you go in and out of the battlefield by air and do combat by air, then you're considered airborne. So the 101st Airborne Division flies where it's going. It is airborne. The glider troops of World War II were airborne because they came in by air. In other words, borne by air. But they weren't paratroopers. They were glider troops or helicopter assault troops. And then you have the paratroopers because they arrive by parachute, which I learned recently was a French word, or a combination of a couple of French words. But so to say I'm airborne does not necessarily mean paratrooper, even in World War II, because the glider troops they all had the airborne tab. So just a piece of side knowledge for you there. So I had the airborne tab, but I had the air assault wings that had the little helicopter in them. And so back to models. That's why when I made my Jeep, I put my unit on my Hasegawa Jeep 135 scale, 101st Charlie 327. Grandchildren, yes. There's no question that kids are the mortal enemy of kit models. Airborne, hoo-ah! And or as we would say, hoo-ah! I did skydive though at the Fort Campbell Sport Parachute Club, so I got a couple of hundred free fall jumps in. Well, a little less than 200 free fall. Took me 16 static lines to get off static line status. Skydiving stuff. Long story. But I tell you what else is the enemy of models is building them in the barracks. I built a couple of models while I was living in the barracks, and we had 3-man rooms. And everybody that comes in, they want to either use it as an ashtray or play with it. You're always coming in finding broken stuff on it. I built a Monogram 148 scale B-17. The only thing I had was black paint, so it came injected in silver, so I just left it in there and just painted the engine, the glare shields and the wheels and the guns, and pretty much left it at that, and put it up on top of the of my wall locker, which was almost like a big armoire. And of course, that didn't last very long. But I remember people I knew who were in the military here that built models, and they had an incident before I got there, but I heard about it, and it kind of scared a couple of people. And I think I was even asked, "Do you have an X-Acto knife?" And I was like, "No, I just sand down the parts." They didn't, because I bought this like at some place that just had a few models. They didn't have any building supplies. And like at TGNY, if anybody remembers that store, Toys, Games, and Yo-Yos, which is not what TGNY stood for. But anyway, apparently a couple of years before, and I think there were one or two guys in the unit still remembered it, so I guess it would have been around 78. They had a guy who was an avid car model builder, and he was a little bit, I wouldn't say a nerd, he was a little different, but he was always getting pestered by the guys about his building models. And apparently he snapped his cap one day. He put a lot of work in these things, and some guy, it was in his room, and, just, and he put a cigarette out in the guy's car model. He literally used the guy's car model as an ashtray. And the guy was working on a model with an X-Acto knife, and he went bananas and attacked all three of them. And of course, he wound up getting the special ward at the hospital. But after that, the health and welfare guy's like, "Okay, we don't want any X-Acto knives in the barracks." And I'm kind of like, well, that's going to make model building fun. And so, well, that's a bit on the dark side. Let's talk about something happier. So one thing I think you guys do know is that molds never die. They just change hands. And a lot of these, when I was doing this thing with Aurora was one of the only companies that had a line of civilian aircraft. And a lot of they got the old Comet molds. Now, I said something a while back that was wrong. They did do their own box art for the Comet kits. They did not use the old Comet box art. And in fact, the ones they did were a lot more sophisticated. But the aircraft I talked about earlier, they didn't do the Learjet in the 182 because that place in Portugal had just botched the molds and the patterns. So the Cherokee 180, the Aztec, the Skymaster, and the Beech 18 came back to the U.S. and were made here. And then the ones they'd gotten from Comet, the Apache, and the others were just reboxed. The Aero Commander and the Cessna 310. Those things are expensive. And Aurora cut the mold for their Jet Commander. I even remember as a kid when I saw the model Jet Commander, well, that's cool, because I had it twice, and should have bought a third one and kept it safe. But I never quite understood why they did the Jet Commander instead of the Learjet and I always kind of pondered that until just recently when Andy told me, and told me the whole story on it. And but Aurora was kind of the go-to, because for some reason, Monogram made two civilian aircraft off scale. The 1-141 Cessna 180, which, yeah, you can see the box right there. That's one of the old box tops up there. It's got very, very just above my fingertip. That's the one with the old one with skydivers going out of it. And they actually skydived out of a 182 at my hometown airport. So, in fact, I made a model of that airplane. Let's see. Here we go. Let's see if we can get it up there. Whoops, wrong way. Let's see. Can you see it? It's right in front of the Sea Fury. That 182 hanging up there is painted up just like the exact same. Try not to knock my mic cord off here. Oh yeah, the joys of doing this live. How did that happen? I am tied in a knot around my chair. Anyway, these bumblebee stripes and black elevators and tips, exactly the way Terry painted his airplane. Got the door open, and the reason it's hanging up there instead of on display, I was going to make a diorama out of it called Any Given Sunday, which was going to show a bunch of skydivers standing around it and getting ready to, to load for a flight. And son of a gun, I knocked it off the table. moving around, elbowed it. It went skydiving, spread the gear, snapped them both off. And of course that was modified because the tail wheel, I made a tricycle gear 182 out of it. And I tried putting pins in and everything else to toughen it back up, but no matter how much I let the gear harden when I was done, I mean, I let it harden for 3 days, I was done, I set it down, I got weights in the nose, I was like, okay, looks good. Come back the next day and they'd spread out. So I figured, well, I guess I'm gonna have to hang it up. But I mean, it's a jump plane, so you know, what the heck. Yeah, that's true, and molds do wear out. Especially ones that did 3-4 million shots. Now, they also, Monogram also made the Piper Tri-Pacer, and like, I forget, it was 135 scale. So the Tri-Pacer is a much smaller plane than 182, but when you put the two kits side by side, they're about the same size. I'm guessing they were made to fit the box. Okay, I've got to get this cable untangled. Oh, there we go. Yay! And three. But, one of the problems, and I sanded that one down, is if you do build the Cessna 141 scale Cessna 180 and you want to make it more accurate, sand off all those bloody rivets. For some reason, they decided to put rivet heads all over it, and they're way out of scale too. That's really my only complaint with that model. I built that model several times as a kid. It'd be nice if they made more general aviation aircraft, but apparently they just don't sell that hot. So you know, and it is a business. I looked at some of the models that just didn't do so well, and you know, there's a lot of stuff I never built. I didn't even realize it existed, even when I was a kid, because I never bought it. Like Aurora made their animal series. You know, they had the bears and a lot of other stuff, and horses. And now that I built that Stagecoach, I'm thinking to myself, hey, I wonder if I could find some 1/16 scale horses, make a 6 team out of it. You know, but yeah, well, you know, 59 years old, still getting exposed to new stuff. One of the joys of model building. And but there is so much we could talk about with models. Oh, by the way, don't know if you guys know, but the famous Tom Daniel, who Garfield, I believe, was gifted me that Rommel's rod. So now when I get around to that, I can have an actual Rommel's rod by the one that Tom Daniel gave me personally, because I'm never building that one. And Tom's son, Kelly, is also a box artist who did Atlantis's box art for its 2-in-1 helicopter kit. You get two Hueys, one's a firefighter and one's a military chopper. And he did the box art for those. So, like father, like son, they, you know, moped moment. And they apparently inherited his dad's talent. So, of course, make no mistake, I still get to chat with or email with Tom from time to time, TD, and someone some years ago, and you can find it on his website, tomdaniel.com. I actually interviewed him, and so it's like an hour-long interview, and he talks about art school and everything, and art school, and Mike Machat could tell you about this too. Art school is not some, I mean, maybe if you go to Otis or one of those throw spaghetti, as Jack Linwood, the famous box artist, said, you know, if you want to throw spaghetti on a wall and call it art, go to Otis. But these actual art schools that these guys went to, where they learned to be illustrators, those are some real grinds to get through that. 6.5 days a week. I mean, everything. He talks about how they teach you to rotate the pencil as you draw, so to keep it even with it. I mean, just the, you know, they could draw when they got there, but these art schools, they're like 4-year-old boot camps. Like, man, God. But that explains why the art's so good and how they can crank it out so fast. They talk about Jack Linwood. They use this thing called gouache, which is like some kind of watercolor, because it dries quickly, so they can do it fast. They don't have time for oils to dry. And which is ironic, complete opposite. Bob Ross did his wet on wet with oils, but he was doing something completely different. And now for something completely different. But they, the speed with which they could crank these things out. They said that Linwood could crank them out in a day. And what makes a lot of people go, was that a lot of times, I wonder where the original is. And Linwood, throw it away. You know, you know, what would you pay for a Linwood or Godek original? Well, what time is it now? Gosh, I don't even know. My battery's starting to get a little weakish, so we're going to have to wrap. Oh, gosh, 49 minutes. Oh, it's got a clock on it. Wow. This is also new to me. Let's see. Somebody posted a question because I'm running out of things to talk about, which is mark that on your calendar. Oh, that's right. Master box. No, I haven't. I never built a master box. Actually, since you brought that up, when I was in the Army, we spent a lot of time riding on Hueys. I was actually in the Army when the Blackhawks, the 860As arrived. Never fly the A model of anything. And you're right. And they have the Jesus nut on top. And Hueys are not supposed to take much negative G because they basically have a big nut on top that holds a rotor blade, a rotor mount on. Or that's what they call a Jesus nut. And I remember in Panama, we're riding in the back of a Huey, and and Hueys make their sound changes obviously depending on the pitch of the blade. It goes so anytime they make a turn, you hear this real massive change, and we head over a cliff. We're flying over the jungle, and he pitches over, and of course even the grunts knew about the Jesus nut, and and it made this whacka 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 sound that I'd never heard before. And I was like, yeah, and, I guess he knew what he was doing because we were fine. But that got my undivided attention. The Hueys, man, that's one helicopter you'll never mistake it for. Well, you could mistake the sound for the early model Cobras because the early model Cobras were built on the Huey transmission, tail boom and everything. Just the body was changed. But when they went to the later models and they changed the rotors and made them heavier and everything, they made a somewhat different sound, but very distinct noise. Frog Kit, talk about. Oh yeah, mold cost. Now, I'm actually working on a mold cost video. Andy had the actual costs of a bunch of Aurora's molds, so I'm working on a video that's just going to show the molds, when it was made, how much it cost then, and adjusted dollars to the day. But a lot of these molds in 2020 dollars were north of $500,000, especially the ones like ships and stuff that were big and had a lot of components, or had a lot of deep components to them. The deeper it gets, the more expensive it gets. Ironically, the mold cost that was cheapest for Aurora was the ones that made them the most money, and those were the figures. They were, most of them were under $10,000 back then, which is roughly $100,000, $80,000 today. And they made them by the millions, except for the Witch. It never sold very well. Yes. In fact, apparently that Stagecoach mold from Marx, when Marx made it, was $100,000 back in 1955, and I did the math on that, and I think it was just shy of $800,000. Well, modern box art's still being made, as I just mentioned with Kelly doing it. You see a lot. You see a lot of modern box art, and it's still done by artists. The quality is extremely high. You look at the new Hasegawa artwork; it's fantastic. I know I'm going to say his name wrong. Is it Kyoki Shigura, the Japanese artist that does a lot of Hasegawa stuff? Fantastic. But I don't think he puts that out nearly as quickly because his is like Jack Linwood made a comment. That I believe the Box Art Den has this article on it, that he's not an artist, he's an illustrator. And although we all see it as artwork. Yeah, the CAD stuff has changed the way they design the molds and everything, and it's gotten rid of a lot of errors, and one of the reasons they're so sharp now. But they are less expensive to make in relative dollars, but you're still going to spend $50,000 on a basic 148 scale kit with 20 or 30 parts. Adam Tooby for current Airfix. Yeah. And Airfix has always had excellent artwork. Molds today, there are a few companies that are using some somewhat newer techniques, and of course it also depends on what you cut out of. Is going to I think in Eastern Europe they're still using beryllium copper, which is where most of those are cut, but it's hazardous material to work with. So most people in the U.S. work with steel, and steel will last longer, but obviously it's harder to cut. And then there are other molds that are made of less hard material if you're not going to have a huge production run. the vinyl and figure kits can be made out of other stuff. So there's a lot to it, but you're not going to get a mold made for less than 50 grand. And if you're talking about a complex kit, it's going to go north in a hurry. Apparently the unwritten rule, the rule of thumb is $1,500 per part. And 53 Chevy mold covers. You know, John Hanley of Johan, where you talk about molding, he did something that apparently no one else has done, but it's kind of interesting. And it's patented. It's in the Johan video. Is that it? Basically, his trees folded on top of each other, but they had stops on them, so the parts wouldn't get crushed. So when you pull it out, you'd have these 3 connected sprue trees that were, you clip them free, but everything was intact. And according to the Joe fans, it works. It was really a good way to do it. I'm sure it was extra cost, because nothing comes for free. But you know, just having the engineers design, because remember when making the molds, physically making them comes after someone had to design them, and whoever designs them has to think about this part shaped like this. It's got to do this. So the runner has to have, you know, they have to figure out the knockout pin points, the injection points, all this stuff. The best way to lay things out to be economical with the plastic as well as the builder, because a lot of us are like, why don't they make all the parts for the chassis here and all the parts of the engine here and keep them together so I don't have to keep looking for them? And that would be nice, but that's not always practical. And yeah, CAD/CAM experienced operators don't come cheap, and you have to pay very talented people who are real engineers to do this. It's hard to imagine when you open up a box and see the kit inside. It's hard to fathom everything that happened in the background to make that little bit of melted, shaped sprue come into place. And to think that in a lot of cases, the box and the instruction sheet and the decals are more expensive than the actual kit. The artwork, you got to pay the artist, and a lot of them don't get royalties, some do. I was Brad Leisure, who watches the channel sometimes, he's done some car box arts. He does box art, and at some point I might do a Zoom video with him or something. He can tell you about it, but I think I don't know of any company that has had full-time staff artists. I think it's always been gig work. They contract an artist, and a lot of times you can tell when a company has shifted artists because no two guys do things the same way. But a lot of artists have different techniques. So, you'll see a box art by the same artist that have no resemblance at all. Well, he did one in one fashion and one in another. I wanted this to look like an old car advertisement, I think was what Brad said on one of them, and then this I wanted to look more like a street venue. So the same artist, can make it look different ways. And you have some guys like Ray Gadeck, the way they mix their colors and everything, the way they presented things, you just sort of knew that that's Ray Gadeck, no matter how the scene was done. Or Jack Linwood with his, what do you call it, fill the box or cram the box, where, people don't want to see wing tips. So, he'll have the core of the airplane right up in your face. Jack Linwood's still my favorite, the grandfather of them all, but they're all great. And those beautiful ones that Mike Machat did for Ladella with the airliners. Oh my gosh. I'm telling you, I know it sounds like I'm making a joke, but kit models and particularly box art, that's no small part of how I ended up being a career pilot. I mean, I had already had a fascination with aviation, but you'd see these magnificent box arts and it would just fuel that natural, So, and I don't regret a moment of it. Well, guys, we've been going at this for coming up on an hour. I guess it's time to sign off. And, well, this has been a hootenanny. We will, let's see. Fine parts are belong to, I realize the CB radio. Man, CB radio, now we're telling ourselves, breaker, 19. I did build one model truck, one model tractor trailer. Somebody got it as a gift, I think, of one of me. I think it was a Kenworth. Those are tough to build. I mean, that Vincent Black Shadow motorcycle was the hardest thing I ever made because of teeny tiny parts. But that tractor trailer was a trick. Interesting mixer. it's not, it's like building a car, but not quite. With that big tall cab, you got to put the sleeper on the back and everything. You have these, I mean, getting everything straight and getting it to adhere properly. It's, to make a nice truck or to make a nice motorcycle, that's some tough stuff to do. Well, folks, on that note, I think I will bid you all farewell. And we just hit the 1 hour mark, and hopefully we can do this again sometime. Hope you had some fun, and good Lord willing, the creek don't rise. I will see you guys after hours tonight. Maybe I'll have some work to show on the old XP50, and we'll just see how it goes. But she's definitely going to be a Bondo queen. But you know, this thing comes with a hole in the bottom for a stand, but no stand. Still thinking ahead. All right, guys. Let's see. All right. Let's see. What button do I push? Okay. Something strange is about to happen. I'm about to start pushing buttons. Well, that was interesting. Oh, there it is. Ta-da! Do you want to stop streaming? Okay. See you later, guys. Take care.